Hello, my name is Reggie and welcome to my channel. Today I will be sharing with you my October and my November wrap-up. I never posted my October wrap-up and I didn't read that many books in November, so we're just going to combine them into one glorious wrap-up. If you enjoy videos about books and writing and storytelling, I definitely recommend you subscribe to this channel because that is the focus of the videos here. I post videos every Tuesday and some other days in between there as well. So definitely also hit the bell dude so you get notified when I post new videos. As per usual, I will be going through the books rated from my least favorite all the way up to my favorite. So first up, I have to talk to you about my least favorite book I read in the last 2 months, and that was Salem's Lot by Stephen King. If you do not know, this was the group book for Spooktober, so a bunch of us read this together. I don't think many of us enjoyed this. As far as I know, not many of us enjoyed this. This is like Dracula, but slower and more pretentious and boring than Dracula. It wasn't scary. It wasn't much at all, to be honest. 2 stars. It's not a 1 star. But, you know, just barely. Next up, I have to talk about option B, Facing Adversity, Building Resiliency, and Finding Joy. This is by Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant. This is basically a story about grief and overcoming grief and how Sheryl Sandberg did that after her husband passed away. Her good friend Adam Grant helped her write this book, and it's kind of her journey through going through that process of losing someone super close to her spouse, and how that affected her whole family, including her children. It's a very personal and emotional story, but it's also very methodical at times because Sheryl definitely depicts like percentages and statistics and things like that, trying to use the statistics basically to say, you know, if something happens like this, you're gonna be okay. Statistically speaking, most people are. I found the jumping back and forth between the statistic moments and the personal moments a little bit jarring. However, I really appreciated what Sheryl was doing here, and I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read Lord of Shadows by Cassandra Clare. Remember last Cassandra Clare book I read and I was like, oh my goodness, this is the best Cassandra Clare book I've read yet. I like her books now. What is happening? Yeah, no, that was a fluke and a 1 book thing. I'm back to being like, There's a lot of really cool diversity and elements like that going on. However, a lot of the points of the book were just annoying to me, including the fact that I feel like a lot of the aspects of the first book were repeated again. This is the 3rd time I've had this complaint about Cassandra Clare's books. I feel like huge aspects of the stories are just being repeated. Like, we have the same villain, or a similar villain, or a similar story. I was super impressed with Lady Midnight, was not impressed by Lord of Shadows. It was slow, it was long going, and it just felt repetitive, and not just repetitive amongst itself, but repetitive to a lot of previous works by Cassie. So, I had a good time. I still really like these characters, but it wasn't all that, so I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. And now that I've been talking about it, I'm kind of wondering if that was generous. Next up, I read Replica by Lauren Oliver. If you haven't heard me talk about this book, because I've talked about it a lot, this is a gimmick book in which you have 2 books in one, essentially. You have half the story told by Lyra's perspective, half the book told by Gemma's perspective. You can read alternating chapters, you can read Gemma's, switch to Lyra's when you're done, vice versa. You can read like 3 chapters, switch to 3, you could do every other, whatever you want. The possibilities are endless with this book. And that was really what sold me on this book, besides the fact that Lauren Oliver wrote it, and I do tend to enjoy Lauren Oliver's books. I enjoyed it, it was a good time, but there are some issues with it, including the fact that the way it ended left some to be desired. There was some issues with fat shaming and just the way one of the main characters saw herself. There were no holes, there was nothing like that. I still found the story to be really interesting. The kind of dialogue that is being told was pretty interesting. I just wish some things would have been dealt with pretty differently. Also, it just didn't like wow me as much as I wanted. It was fine, but not great, so I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Next up to talk about, I have The Sandcastle Empire by Kayla Olson. This is a dystopian, one of the first dystopians I've read in a hot minute, and I really enjoyed my time getting back into dystopians. It was really interesting, and this one was really fun because it was a little different. In this dystopian, we find ourselves in a world where our main character is kind of imprisoned of sorts on this beach, essentially. And in the beginning of the book, she breaks off this beach with a few people that ended up tagging along on her escape voyage. The story really picks up once they get to this island, and this island is equated to Lost in so many ways. Very intense, weird, strange phenomenons are happening on this island. The girls then have to kind of figure out how to survive, if they really want to be on this island, etc., etc. It was a really enjoyable time. However, I'm not sure if this is a part of a series or a standalone. If this is a standalone, I was not satisfied by the ending. On top of that, again, the story just didn't wow me. It was really entertaining during the time. I have no huge faults to poke at it. However, it just wasn't amazing, so I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. If you haven't read a dystopian and you've been interested in this one, or if you really liked Lost, definitely recommend this one. So far, all of the books I've listed for you have been read in the month of October, but these are the first ones I read in November, and they are the Alex and Ada graphic novel series. So there's 3 volumes in this graphic novel series. I read all 3 of them this month. I gave all 3 of them 4 out of 5 stars. They were super good, super entertaining. I really liked the story. The ending was just not what I expected, which I loved so much. The ending is probably, in my opinion, the best part of the series. This is a graphic novel trilogy that tackles the story of robotics and artificial intelligence, essentially. In the story, we have our main character, Alex, who gets a robot companion named Ada. She is there to kind of like assist and do things for him. So that's kind of where the story takes off, is Alex trying to figure out how this relationship with Ada will work. Super good. I really, really enjoyed it. Next up, we'll go back to a book I read in October, and that is Dan Amongst the Sticks and Bones by Shauna McGuire. This is the prequel to Every Hearted Doorway. So in the first book in this series, Every Hearted Doorway, we find ourselves at a boarding school for kids who have returned home from mystical doorways from other worlds. So essentially the idea is that like the rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland or the closet in Narnia are real. Kids can really go to these other worlds. Sometimes, in some instances, they aren't stuck there forever. They come back to our world, and they have some hard times adjusting. They end up at this boarding school. Basically, this prequel follows 2 of the characters we meet in that original story when they enter their door. It's a super dark, gothic doorway world they go into. It's super interesting. I liked this book more than I liked Every Hearted Doorway, which I know is an unpopular opinion because like everyone loves Every Hearted Doorway. For me, it was just okay. Mainly because it wasn't what I was expecting, but this was exactly what I was expecting, and it was executed beautifully, and I couldn't have asked for anything more. I really, really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Next up is When It Gets Hard, because I gave all of the books that are going to be in the rest of this video a 5 out of 5 stars. So, we'll start off with the one book I read in November. So in November I read 4 books. 3 of them were Alex and Ada. The 4th book was Wonder by R.J. Palacio. This I read because the movie came out and I wanted to see the movie, which I did. It was so good. Wonder is the story of our main character who is named Augie. He is 10 years old, entering the 5th grade and public schooling for the first time. He has a facial deformity and had many surgeries growing up, which is why he was unable to attend public school. His surgeries have slowed down recently, and he will be able to attend public school for the first time, and his parents think he should, so he does. And this is the story of basically Augie going through the 5th grade. This book starts the summer before 5th grade, goes through 5th grade graduation. It is a beautiful look at kindness and like acceptance, and just it's a wonderful story. It also tackles how everyone has their own struggles in life and you can't really compare them, even though some struggles are worse than others. It's just a beautiful book. Really puts everything into perspective. I really love this. I read it quite a few years ago, gave it like a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I reread it, I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. It's still like middle grade-y and a little cheesy for my taste, but there was something so wonderful about reading it and watching the movie, and it just made me happy and joyful. Because I was expecting the cheesy moments, they weren't as bad for me this time, and I was able to fully appreciate the work as a whole and give it 5 out of 5 stars. Next up, I have to talk to you about Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. This is a historical fiction, own voices, LGBTQIA+ book, and I am all for that. This follows our main character, who is named Monty. Monty is going on basically his last hurrah. He's going on a tour, vacation, road trip of sorts through Europe, and it is his last hurrah because when he comes back from this trip, he really needs to buckle down, focus, and help his dad take care of the estate. He's going on his journeys with his best friend named Percy and his sister. Monty has a huge crush on his best friend Percy, which is adorable to see play out through the course of this book. Monty also is just kind of like this rich, snobby, kind of just super not self-aware, oblivious, rich kid, essentially. And so through the course of this book, you kind of see him go through his own struggles and discover other people's struggles and kind of figure his life out, and it's just beautiful. Next up, I have to talk about Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard, Book 3, The Ship of the Dead by Rick Riordan. That is a mouthful, but this book was so incredibly good. This is essentially following some Einherji and demigods from Norse mythology, and it's so great. Magnus Chase is easily the best protagonist since Percy Jackson, in my opinion. He's better than Percy, sorry, but Rick has had time to hone his craft now, and it's fantastic. I also absolutely love the diversity that is presented in this book. We have a gender fluid character, we have a character who's practicing Muslim, we have a character who's in an arranged marriage, we have a displaced main character, we have some homeless representation, we have deaf, hard of hearing, and ASL representation. It's just chock full of good stuff. And this book really brought it home well. It concluded things up well, but not perfectly, so I'm really hoping we get some more journeys and story with Magnus and his friends, because they're my favorite, and I highly recommend you read these. If you haven't read any of Rick Riordan's previous works, this is a really good place to jump in. However, there are callbacks and characters that come in from other books, so if you have read his other works, you will not be disappointed by some of the Easter eggs that you'll find in these books. It's a really good time. Next up, I have to talk to you about Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. Yes, I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. This is, I've come to the decision, my favorite John Green book. It's wonderful. It is Own Voices John Green, and this deals with our main character who has OCD. She has what she considers thought spirals, and it just tackles everything really well. It has a very round and thorough conversation about therapy, medication, friendships, growing up, coming of age, and it's beautiful, and the representation is so good, and you can tell that John is speaking from deep-seated personal experience when he talks about some of these things, and it's just incredible. So now we're going to talk about one of the best things I've read this year, one of the best things I've read in a long time, and hands down my favorite book of poetry of all time, and that is Counting Descent by Clint Smith. This is Clint Smith's look at himself and the Black experience and growing up in the way he did, in the situations he did, and it is beautiful. The way Clint Smith uses words just blows my mind. He's so concise, every word matters, every word's important. Every poem is chock full of these quotes that just took my breath away. If you're looking for beautiful writing, read this. If you're looking for good poetry, read this. If you're looking for good modern day poetry, read this. If you're looking for own voices, read this. If you're looking for a book that tackles the Black experience, read this. If you're looking for a book about a kid who grew up wanting to read and write, read this. If you are just looking for a book that is amazing, please read this. So those are all of the books I read in the month of October and November. Most of those were read in the month of October, but I just never put out my wrap-up, so here you have it. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next video. Bye! Baby, I beg you, yeah.